Hello, and welcome to Mystic Dog Mama, the podcast for soul-led dog mamas, where you'll discover how to best nourish your dog and yourself, mind, body, and soul. I'm your host, Dr. Alexia Meller. Hi there, and welcome to February's Fetch First Friday episode, where I'm joined by Stacey Renfrey of Hozo Hounds. If you're new to us, we're so glad that you're here. The first Friday of every month, Stacey and I talk about a topic of your choice through our F.E.T.C.H framework lens. F.E.T.C.H stands for fresh foods, energetics, targeted approaches, curiosity, and holistic health, which are the core elements of how we believe we can arrive at optimal health and well-being for our dogs and ourselves. It's the same framework that Stacey and I use in our canine nutrition practices, and we teach you how to use this for your own dog in our F.E.T.C.H membership. More on that in just a second. But first, in today's episode, Stacey and I tackle the topic of dental health. February is Dental Health Awareness Month, so we wanted to share with you some different ways that you can help support your dog's dental health through diet and other tools, and talk to you about why dental health is so critical to overall health, all through the F.E.T.C.H framework lens. We talk about what periodontal disease is and why dental health needs to be at the top of our priority list. We'll cover some different foods that support dental health, DIY toothpaste, our thoughts on water additives, and other things that you might want to consider to keep your pup's pearly whites healthy. And we'll share what has worked and hasn't worked in our own experiences with caring for Lucky and Ted. Dental health is something we often skip over, but it's such a critical component of our dog's overall health and well-being. We hope that you take away some useful tips to try with your own pup. And in case you haven't seen our Instagram or YouTube posts, we have some super exciting news. Our F.E.T.C.H membership is officially open for founding members. Honestly, we're so unbelievably excited to create this space with you. If you are looking for a community and space that brings together evidence-based nutrition with spiritual wisdom, all aimed at taking the confusion and overwhelm out of nourishing your dog, then you are in the right place. F.E.T.C.H is a beyond the bowl approach that looks at health from a multifaceted, whole dog, whole person perspective. And we want to teach you this framework in order to help you take control of your dog's health journey, and in hopes that you never need to come and see us for therapeutic support. Although we are here to help you with health challenges if your dog does have them. We'll help you put the puzzle pieces together to feel confident in knowing what is right for you and your dog, and you'll be supported by like-minded sisters cheering you on. And did we mention that there will be opportunities to dive into the woo if that calls to you? Honestly, this is the community that Stacey and I were looking for when we were struggling with Shadow and Lucky's health journeys. So we joined forces to create this space for you. We are so excited to welcome you in. And as a founding member, you'll get in at the lowest price and get to help us shape the membership so that we can create exactly what you need and want. I mean, how amazing is that? If you'd like some more information, comment F.E.T.C.H on Spotify or YouTube, DM me on Instagram at Mystic Dog Mama, or you can reach out to me at mysticdogmama.com and we'll get you the information. And don't forget, if you haven't joined our newsletter, make sure you do so that you can get our brand new guide to decoding your dog's energetic paw print for free. I've left the link in the show notes. Okay, on that note, let's go. Hi, Stacey.
Hello, we're back again.
Back again.
How is it February? Seriously, how did that happen?
I don't know. It's funny. I heard people talking about how 2025 is like a year of acceleration and just so many ways, so many levels. And one of the things we're meant to experience is like time passing super quickly, but this is absurd.
This is bonkers. Absolutely insane. I'm January normally has 972 days. They seem to have flown by so quickly. I don't know how we're here, but we are. And now we can talk all things dental health because we're in dental health.
That's right. That's right. So welcome everybody. It is our February F.E.T.C.H First Friday. And
well done.
Thank you. It's still a tongue twister. And as Stacey said, we are focusing on dental health because this is Dental Health Awareness Month. And we put out the questions with the call for if anybody had any questions about dental health and what are the things you kind of struggle with. So we're going to talk about some of these things through the F.E.T.C.H lens. And yeah, maybe it's a good place to start with what do we mean by by dental health? What is periodontal disease?
Well, it covers all sorts of things, doesn't it, really? But it's essentially about what's going on in the mouth. I think it's important to consider its gums and teeth and tongue and kind of the whole mouth structure, not
Mhm.
just, you know, one or the other. It's everything, isn't it? And looking at the whole mouth
Yeah.
and understanding what's going on in there. Yeah.
Exactly. And also, I think it's important to talk about when we're talking about specifically periodontal disease, and one of the questions, so I'll kind of tie this in, one of the questions that I was asked was, are the sort of superficial cleanings for your dog enough? So we will get into this, but a lot of concerns around dental health are about dentals and the anesthesia. And so we'll get into that. And I know a lot of people prefer to have the kind of superficial cleanings where the dog is awake, like the scaling and that kind of a thing. But one of the concerns about that is that you don't actually get to see what's going on underneath the
Yeah.
gums. And so looking at the ligaments, for example, that are holding the teeth in place and the roots of the teeth and anything that might be going on up in there, which is actually the places that we want to be most concerned about when we're thinking about dental health in relation to overall health. So periodontal disease does talk about, it does include what's going on invisibly to us underneath the gums. And that's what a dental where the dog is under anesthetics would start to explore. So that's just one of the,
Yeah, they'll literally dig a bit deeper, won't they, and get
they
in. And
will.
it's how those bacteria cross into the bloodstream and that the knock-on effect further within the body that's why that could potentially be a concern and why we need to be looking a little bit deeper than just the superficial stuff on the surface. It's
Yeah,
understanding the mouth as a whole, isn't it, rather than
exactly.
one
Exactly.
thing. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I thought it would be helpful for us today to kind of start off with like what periodontal disease is and some of the statistics too, which are absolutely shocking with so many of our dogs actually have different levels of periodontal disease and how you might start to recognize it. And so some of the stats that I found, it was like and I've seen it vary between like 80 and 90% of dogs over 3 years of age. 80 to 90% of dogs over 3 years of age have or will have periodontal disease. That's insane.
It's bonkers. And when you think about other conditions that like because we've just said that it is like a precursor potentially for other stuff, that 80% feeds into a lot of the other conditions that could be going on. So it's so important that it's one of the things that we kind of keep at the top of our checklist of what we're considering when we're thinking about our dog's health. Yeah,
Absolutely.
100%. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, how do you know if your dog has periodontal disease? Sorry if you can hear Lucky whining for treats next to me, but
Ted's
the,
luckily gone back to sleep, so we're okay.
he's probably going to start with a little demand barking. That's okay. But so one of the things that you might notice first of all is gingivitis. And so a lot of this is like you would hear at your human dentist, right? Like it's the same stuff. So gingivitis meaning the gingiva are the gums, itis, inflamed. So you'll
Blamed.
see like redness around like the gums at the base of the teeth or you might notice there might even be abscesses, for example, any kind of changes in the gums. Another thing is tartar. Those are kind of like the two visual things I think that most people would see of plaque. You don't necessarily see quite so much until it turns into tartar, but this is this exact same thing as your dentist is going to say to you that you want to get rid of the plaque that turns into the hard tartar and gathers up at the gum line, which often creates that inflammation, and that's
Inflammation and causes the gingivitis. So it's
exactly.
knock-on effects. Yeah.
Exactly. Some other things would be like bad breath. So
Yeah.
doggy breath, not normal, people.
Yeah, it's not. It's really not. Like if it's constant, we need to be understanding what's going on in there. Yeah.
Yep.
If they've just had sprats for dinner, that's understandable. But if this is all the time and you're just like, whoa, then yeah, maybe we need to start digging a little bit deeper and looking a little bit into what's going on in there. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think it's important to kind of raise because we're sort of culturally used to this idea of doggy breath. Like, oh, all dogs' breath kind of smells, but actually it's kind of like the Frito feet thing and yeast. That isn't necessarily a normal thing. And so if you're noticing that your dog has really bad breath constantly, that is an
Yeah.
indicator
And
that
not
there's something going on.
context specific, like just eating, or they've just
Right.
been like when Ted's had he has a hoof or something, they stink. And then it kind of gets into it makes the fur around his mouth smell for like 2 hours up. They are hideous. He loves them though, but it's that if it goes away though, so that's okay. So it's part of just noticing when it happens and how
Exactly.
frequent.
Exactly. And so the question often comes up as well, like, how concerned do I need to be about dental health? Like, is it that big of a deal? Like, why is it important? And I think it is a big deal. It's like Stacey was saying, it's a precursor to a lot of other issues. Hold on, are you gonna come up?
I'd like to come
Okay.
sit. I'll show you my pearly whites.
Yeah. Okay. So Lucky and I are traveling at the moment, and he's a little sensitive. It's a little bit of extra love. Are you going to talk about your teethies?
I'd
Yeah.
love to.
But it's a precursor to a lot of other health conditions. And, actually, speaking of Lucky, this was one of the things that I became really well aware of when he was having kidney issues, because there is a direct relationship
Yeah.
between dental health and kidney health, as well as cardiovascular health. You might have even had it as your own experience of going to the dentist. If you've got any kind of heart issues that you have to tell your dentist before any work is being done that you've got those issues, and you might be asked to take some medications as a preventative kind of thing, because the bacteria goes directly into the bloodstream and then is filtered through the kidneys and goes through the heart and can create different problems. So it is an important thing, as well as the fact that, as you will know from issues with your own teeth, it's really painful.
Yeah.
It's really
Not
painful.
comfortable. No.
And so we do want to kind of prioritize it, which is why we're bringing some attention to it today. Um, and what else was I
Sorry,
going to
I
say?
was
No.
just reading. I was reading interesting things. That sort. Sorry, the problem is this is another rabbit hole, isn't it? Because there's so many other aspects to it. There's yeah, and when you think about it, it's the 80%. And I was just looking at like breeds most frequently affected, like miniature poodles, dachshund, Yorkshire Terriers, Cocker Spaniels. Got one of those. Jack Russells. Least affected, interesting, Border Collies, German Shepherds, Labradors, and Staffordshire Bull Terriers.
Mhm.
Now, I wonder if it is because any of those are more predispositioned to chewing, because all the collies and the German Shepherds and the Labradors and the Staffies I know chew
Do a lot.
like, yeah. So I
There,
wonder, that's just a thought that went through my head. I wonder if there is something in predisposition as to how much they chew instinctively, like want to
right. I
nom
think
down.
that could certainly be part of it. I think there's also been there are many studies that have been done that show that there is a correlation between breed and basically breed size, meaning like jaw size as well,
Mhm.
and periodontal disease. So the smaller breeds, and I see this with him too, the teeth are more compacted. So that creates spaces, or really kind of lack of space for things to kind of all gather on the
And
teeth
accumulate, yeah.
that accumulate and can lead to periodontal disease. So we see a lot of smaller dogs having issues. They're often the ones that need a lot of extractions, and where you see like the Chihuahuas with the tongues hanging out of their mouths, that kind of a thing, because
Yeah.
they've had to have a lot of teeth extracted. So if you do have a smaller breed, this does become something that you want to take more prevention with. And I find for Lucky, I still have issues with him, despite the fact that I feed him raw meaty bones. And we'll get into the role of raw meaty bones and how to choose raw meaty bones for dental health. But I have issues with him of accumulation around his canines and his incisors.
100%.
Always,
Same with Ted. It's
always.
same with me. I feed raw meaty bones, but it's that for him, it's his canines. They're the ones particularly, but still. But and we'll get into some supplements and some other bits later on. But I'm trying some new things, and I think we're making some progress now. But yeah, even when you you're kind of trying to tick all those boxes and thinking ahead and kind of almost like we're thinking with the fetch methodology, but you're still encountering issues because it is such a problem, and you're constantly having to reevaluate how you're tackling it. And that one product that I know that worked brilliant brilliantly for me last year, or not for me, but for Ted, but worked brilliantly last year, is still good, but it hasn't, we've built up again. So I'm trying to understand what's going on for him. But again, he's 10 this year as well. So there's age things and all those other parts of that puzzle that I need to start considering now. So another fetch lens on Ted, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the thing with Fetch, right? Is that it's constantly evolving and it's a framework that you keep applying and you look at what's changing. And like we say all the time, every dog is an individual and harmony and balance are constantly shifting across the day, across the year, across seasons, all of that kind of stuff. So what has worked for you one time with your dog might not work with them in another circumstance. And so how do you start to evolve it? So we're going to get into all of that stuff today. So we've kind of covered like what periodontal disease is and why you want to think about it and the breeds that are kind of more predisposed to it. So if we start to then apply a fetch lens to it, I think one of the first things that might be helpful to talk about is, and most people who listen to this are probably already aware of this, but I think it's important to remind people about debunking the myth that kibble cleans teeth because you're crunching it. I'm sure every single one of us has heard that. I heard that when I first got lucky and was like, oh, okay, so I'm supposed to feed him kibble because this helps with his teeth. Not true. Do you want to talk a little bit about why that's not true?
Well, I think, I mean, I think the biggest part of that is that they're carbohydrate laden little nuggets of what essentially turns to sugar. And if they're crunching on that, we all know that sugar isn't good for teeth. We all know that as that gets processed, this comes back to the microbiome within the mouth and the dysbiosis that creates as well, that it doesn't do anything. And I've seen dogs eat kibble and they literally just kind of inhale it. So they might crunch it once, but it's only going to be on these back boys. There's going to be nothing on the front ones. There's no kind of really chewing. It's only on the big ones at the back, the molars and the what's the C one? The middle one.
The carnassial teeth.
Yeah. Can never say that. It's never going to be those ones, it's always going to be those. It's never going to be the front ones, which is where you tend to get so much of the build up at the front. So yeah, it's that. And it's the same with the those products that are shaped like a star and the chew sticks that are, those ones, because, it's got ridges on it and it's going to clean their teeth. But again, if you've ever seen a dog eat them, they always put them to the back and they just literally take the chunks off. So it's not that action that we want to clean the teeth. And I have seen that there's kibble pieces that are dental shaped. I don't know what that means because they're triangular or they're one I've seen has got holes in it, like there's a hole in the middle, like almost like a mini, it looks like a Cheerio, and I'm like, but how? So yeah, I think it's let's just kind of debunk that we're not cleaning our teeth with kibble. There's no toothpaste on there. There's nothing in there that's going to do any good for teeth.
Exactly. And I think it's also a helpful reminder that dogs do not have they don't have any digestive enzymes in their saliva, meaning that they also do not have amylase, which is the digestive enzyme that's needed to break down starches. So if they've got the carbs all over their teeth, it's literally just sugar sitting there turning into
festering.
Yeah, festering, feeding all the bad bacteria. Because I think it's probably worth backing up a little bit. Let's back up one step with what's going on with plaques. You brought up the microbiome. I think, Lucky, are you actually going to, I don't know if you can see, he's cleaning up on too.
Oh, he'd like to, he wants
to join the conversation.
Yes, I'd like to join in, please.
Oh, goodness. So as Stacey said, the mouth has its own microbiome. And what is happening when plaque is forming is that there's a biofilm that's created that then coats the teeth. That is what turns into plaque, that then turns into, as it hardens, turns into tartar. And one of the real issues with once it gets to the tartar stage is that it kind of creates like a cement seal, and the bacteria is trapped underneath that, and especially trapped at the gum line. And that's the stuff that we want to avoid.
That's where you get the red inflamed kind of bit over.
Exactly.
And it's so common on those canines, on
exactly
those the two big ones. Yeah.
Exactly. And so when we're thinking about how we can use food and a fresh food approach to support dental health. For me, there's a couple of things that I think about, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Stacey. Like one, it's not just feeding. There is an element of feeding for the teeth, and we'll get into that. But I think it's making sure that you are feeding a species appropriate and an energetically appropriate diet for your dog so that you are reducing inflammation throughout the whole body, right? So when you're keeping everything in check, when you've got a functioning gut microbiome, you will also have a functioning oral microbiome that can help to deal with the kind of like the quote unquote bad bacteria in the mouth that lead to plaque, that lead to tartar. So we want to think of it that way. But also, if you've listened to my interview with Dr. Tom Lonsdale, who is, in my opinion, sort of like the godfather of all things raw meaty bones. Like he is so passionate about this because of what he saw in practice before he was an advocate for raw meaty bones and saw the impact that not only species inappropriate food, but this comes to the question that I've had a lot from listeners as well. I feed a raw diet. Why does my dog still have bad teeth? And a lot of dogs are fed the barf model, or they're fed raw, but with like say completes. They're not necessarily given raw meaty bones. And although raw and barf is great for the body, it doesn't give what we call, oh, sorry. Hold on.
Like you would like hit the earphones in.
Oh my goodness. This is what happens when you do a podcast with dogs.
Well, it is about dogs, and
It
he's
is
just
bad.
joining in. Bless him. He just
He
wants to
just
be there. Love
he
him,
needs
of
he needs a
course.
little cuddle. But what we see is when we're not giving the dogs something that we call struggle factor, where they are not having to either really chew something or tear at something or rip at something. There's nothing to disrupt that biofilm to kind of wipe it away or to help scrape against the tartar that has accumulated. So we do see, despite the fact that you might be feeding lovely 80-10-10s with additions to it or completes or whatever, we still have to think about dental health because you want to make sure that there's something physically scraping against the teeth to
And
help take
that's
that down.
I think that's one of my biggest bugbears with this is from the UK market, particularly with raw food manufacturers, that they will put, great for dental hygiene on an 80-10-10. And I'm like, no, no, no. I can understand it if we're talking from the microbiome perspective of supporting a good gut microbiome, which will impact the mouth microbiome, but it doesn't serve the purpose to promote dental health
Right.
because it hasn't got the hassle factor. It hasn't got the real nom side to it. So that's just a bugbear of mine and I
Mhm.
get really cross with the labels. I'm like, you can't put that on there because that's not on a bag of
Yeah.
raw bones. Yes, you can, but
Yeah,
on that, no, you can't. That's not right.
exactly.
You're there. It's all to me. That's almost as bad as the kibble for teeth because
Mhm.
it's still saying that one thing is going to solve that problem when actually it's so multifaceted. You can't just say that one thing is going to help. You're going to have to try various things because every dog is different.
Exactly. Exactly. And
Brilliant.
but it's true. And I think, this is a similar argument that Dr. Tom Lonsdale has and why he's really upset with the way that the barf and the raw and the fresh movement has gone, where if you've not listened to the episode, I definitely recommend that you go and listen to him tell this story because it's really wonderful and it's poetic and beautiful as well of how he came to this understanding. So I won't spoil that for you. Go and listen to that. But the key takeaway for our conversation today is that he looks at when we're thinking about the relationship of different species in this overall ecology of how the world is kind of set up, how nature is set up. Nature has its checks and balances to make sure that no one group is kind of taking over and therefore losing out on food supply, right? Like so the nature's checks and balances system includes things like the carnivores to help keep the herbivores in check. And so he started looking at, but what's keeping the carnivore is in check. And for him, he came to the understanding that it is periodontal disease, that is what kills a carnivore. And it's why chewing raw meaty bones, he refers to it as the key to the carnivore code. Like it is the primal thing that makes a carnivore a carnivore. It is meat, but it's not really just the meat. It's like the meat on bones that makes a carnivore a carnivore. And so for their overall health, nature has designed it that they need to eat ostensibly raw meaty bones. And so he was seeing in his own vet practice that so many dogs and cats were coming in with absolutely horrific teeth despite being fed fresh food. And so this is how we started to put the puzzle pieces together, that we need to be regularly feeding raw meaty bones to our dogs. So that's one part. And arguably, I don't know. Well, yeah, I guess I would say it is the kind of primary part of when we're thinking about fresh food around teeth for dogs is really prioritizing something like raw meaty bones, in addition to feeding food that is going to be right for them energetically, and that's also going to support the overall body, because again, we want to think about dental health as part of the overall ecosystem of health.
Yeah.
Anything you wanted to add to that, my friend?
No, I mean that I think so. There's so much fear around raw meaty bones, though. I think that has become such a big issue, and I think that we're constantly trying to counter that actually raw meaty bones, not cooked, but raw meaty bones are safe. Obviously, we have to consider the size of the dog, the size of the bone, how well used they are to having bones. Are they starter? Are they entry level, or have they graduated? Where are they on that scale of what exposure they've had to bones? Because some dogs will just naturally take to it, and some dogs will just be like, what the hell have you given me? Like, what is, and they lick it and they're not sure, or they might go and bury it in the garden. A lot of dogs that are introduced to bones will go and bury them because it's so high value, and all of a sudden they've got this amazing treasure. But there's also another reason, because they will do that to go and get some microbiome and goodies on there as well, because then they go back to it and they know that there's some goodies on there. So don't be afraid if they go and bury things, leave them. But yeah, I think the whole fear over bones and obstructions and kind of choking and tearing intestine, all that kind of stuff is so kind of hyped, because I think that the issue is that vets do see those things happen, but they're coming from the cooked bones that are sold still so widely across all pet shops. We've all seen them, the kind of the dry bit, and again, it's the size of the bone. So when you get up to the big weight-bearing bones, they have the potential to cause some really big damage, and that, and they're the ones we don't want. The necks and the feet and the wings are all really fantastic, because they all give that need to move it around their mouth, and that's what we're looking for, that kind of constant moving and move it to break that biofilm and to create that movement to get rid of things, acting like a toothbrush, and that's what we want to do. So Ted has various size bones throughout the day, not throughout the day, sorry, throughout the week. So once a week he will get a like a lamb neck or a venison neck or something that's big and meatier, because I know they're the ones. The rest of them, 2 chomps and they're gone. He's a pro. But the necks, they take him some time, because he really has to chew on them, and that's what helps with on the build up of his canines. So they're the ones so again, it's choosing the ones for the purpose that you need them to have as well, potentially. If you're looking at the fact that you've got potentially some build up, what bones could you use to get your dog to get that movement? Because Ted will only use bones. If I give him a neck, like a turkey neck or a chicken neck, because they're long and thin, they're a couple of bites and they're gone. They don't last very long. It's the chunkier ones that he needs to actually kind of munch through.
Well, I think this is a good time to kind of talk about where you might see sort of 2 categories of raw meaty bones, and one being edible and the other one being recreational, and kind of break that down, as well as what does it mean to choose bones that are appropriate size. So I'll start really quickly with, when we're talking about edible bones, those are the ones that we're using for the dog's calcium intake, right? So when we're talking about 10% bone. It's the ones that they're actually going to ingest. Recreational bones would be like really large knuckle bones, for example, that the dog is not meant to eat at all. They're not meant to consume that bone, but there is enough sinew and meat, ligaments, all that good stuff that's left on the bone that they're actually, that's what they're eating, and they're pulling it off the bone. And as a consequence, their teeth are kind of rubbing against that bone. So when you're thinking about feeding dogs, you want to think, am I feeding this because I'm feeding it for their bone content, or am I feeding this so they can just chew against? There'll be two different things. And I think one of the big things that was helpful for me with thinking about like how to give Lucky Bones in that same way that you're talking about, Stace, of like what is this serving, is especially for small dogs. I think there is this there I kind of see two different camps of concern. We small dog owners get really worried about like the dog choking on something. So how do you choose something? And I feel like the larger dog owners kind of worry about the dog just gulping something and getting no kind of teeth action from it. So for those of us with small dogs who are really worried about the dog choking, I start to look at what is the size of the dog's head. You want to think about like, so what can actually fit into the mouth safely? One of the things that I find really helpful, you want to go bigger. If you're wanting them to chew on it, you want to go bigger than the dog's mouth so they can't just inhale something. So for example, if I'm feeding ribs, I never ever feed a single rib. I feed them in like two or three, so that there's no chance of Lucky just sort of inhaling that, right? As well as the fact that he's got to work in between those rib bones. So those of us, again, with the small dogs where it is the front teeth that tend to be a problem for small dogs in particular. So to get him to do what you were talking about, Ted doing on the necks, I find it better for Lucky to do it with ribs. And it's that he's having to pull the meat from in between the ribs. And so often I will actually like hold that for him. This will be dependent upon your dog and how they've been trained to with these sorts of things, because they can resource guard. That can be a tendency because they are such high value. So you want to make sure that you know your dog for this. But I find it really helpful to kind of hold that for him. But if I'm feeding something also like I know for him, so again, to give people a kind of comparison, Lucky is 4.3 kilos, 10 pounds. He has to work on a chicken wing. That's a bit of a challenge for him. And I just monitor him. I'm there. I'm not hovering over him, but I'm sort of there. So this is sort of another caveat to this. Never feed your dog raw meaty bones unsupervised. Always make sure that you are around in case there is something happening and you can kind of intervene. But if you're concerned, particularly with a small dog over like a wing or even like a chicken neck or something, you could start off by you hold, again, make sure that this is safe for you to do with your dog. You hold one end of the neck and you start introducing it to them. And this is something that you can then even teach them to move around their mouths. You kind of let them take it to the back and you kind of pull it to the four teeth, and then again to the other side. So you're making sure the whole mouth is cleaned. And then if you really are concerned about choking, let them chew it until it's down to kind of a nub, and then you take that away. You don't let them finish it, and you discard that.
Some people use tongs if they don't want to touch things. So there's ways to handle it if you want to use some tongs. I've seen people use pliers as well to get a really good grip on it. So you don't have to, if it feels a bit icky and you don't want to touch it, there are ways around it so that you can help and support, particularly if they are new to having raw meaty bones and haven't had them before. I think that there's another breed that probably needs to be considered when we're talking about RMBs. Sorry, that's the acronym RMBs for raw meaty bones. Is the brachy breeds, that there is probably a little bit more concern as well with the brachy breeds about being careful. So it might be, if you've got a brachy breed, that you do use your 80-10-10s for your kind of bone content for the actual what they're eating, and then you choose a much bigger recreational bone for them for their teeth cleaning, because they are renowned for just trying to inhale it, and because of the shape of their face, and they don't have the length of the dogs with a longer muzzle, that we need to be careful. So I think just with the brackies, we need to just think about, again, what breed they are, what their tendency is to try and swallow, and pretty much all the ones I've met, they just want to inhale stuff. So it's about
Yeah.
just being careful and, like you say, monitoring and being there with them when they have them
Yep.
and being cautious,
Yeah. No, I
but
think that's brilliant.
choosing. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you for mentioning that because it's very true. And it's also why in terms of as well for those dogs that do sort of go after any kind of bone, either they'll just chew on it or the aggressive chewers as well is another one. The reason we say to avoid weight-bearing bones is because they are harder. Because if you think about it, they're the bones that are holding the weight of the animal up, and especially larger. A lot of the bones that you would find would be, say, like cow bones. So those are big, heavy bones.
Yeah.
They are great for recreational bones for smaller dogs, but not for larger dogs that might actually
Power
try to eat
chewers.
that because the power chews that those are going to fracture teeth. So that's the other concern that people have is the teeth fracturing. So you want to avoid weight-bearing bones. You want to go for softer bones. So that's where poultry bones, poultry carcasses, the frame, are really good for dogs, wings, necks, ribs, feet.
Yeah, turkey. I mean, for the power chewers and some of that. I mean, yeah, the ribs are brilliant. You can get pork ribs, you can get beef ribs, you can get all sorts. And goose wings, they're fantastic because they're actually really they're solid. So goose wings, if you've got a bigger dog like the Labradors or some of the other ones that are power chewers, but they're great because there's enough size, but they're soft enough that they're not going to cause issues with potential slab fractures and stuff, which is obviously where we need to be really careful because that opens up a whole new can of worms. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's choosing safely, isn't it? I think it's just being aware about your dog and what the potential risk is and where
yeah,
you feel comfortable with that as well. And just, I suppose it's almost giving you the as much as we'd love you to do that, if it feels too much, then it's okay. There are other options. There are other things that we can do. It's not that you're wrong if you don't do it. I think because again, there can come the guilt that, oh, I should be doing it, but it's just too scary for me. Well, that's okay. That might change. But in the short term, there are other things that you can be doing through the food and through the other things we're going to go through. But it's not an all or nothing. It's an ideal. If we can do
exactly.
it, brilliant. But if we
Exactly.
can't, then that's okay. Because there are some people that will have had trauma around another dog that may have choked. And, those, I think you spoke with someone recently that had a similar issue, wasn't it? It was something where something had happened with their previous dog and it was kind of carrying on into the new dog. And we don't want to create any of that energy around a food type or a food product. So I think just being mindful of what we're bringing, if we're fearful about it, that creates the opportunity to potentially have some issues. Whereas if we're open to it, that's different. And if that takes you to some time to get to that point, that's okay.
Exactly. And not every dog can eat raw meaty bones. There
Or
are
wants
dogs
to.
or wants to. Yeah. So for any number of reasons. So that's okay, but we do just want to address raw meaty bones as an option and as
Yeah.
kind of an optimal natural option for keeping your dog's teeth healthy. I was going to talk about this in the holistic kind of and actually more the curiosity place, but I think it's worth talking about it now. I have heard from people like my dog just doesn't like raw meaty bones. And one of the things that can be true, and it could just be they need it introduced in a different way or a different type of bone. And this was an experience I went through with Lucky. So I just wanted to share this in case it resonates with anybody about how you can kind of find your way into it. Lucky did not take to raw meaty bones immediately. He was doing, like you were saying, Stacey, he was licking it and then he'd back off from it. He was like, I don't know what I think about this. And I was concerned that he was just a dog that didn't like bones, but I was persistent with it. And so I tried a variety of different things. And some of the things that worked for me with him that may help for you just to try as options to try are to introduce was one, I tried a variety of different types of bones. And so you'll hear in some groups, they'll say, definitely stay away from Eddie beef bones, you do want to stay away from marrow bones. That was something that we didn't say either, or machine cut bones. You definitely want to stay away from them. But they'll say like, stay away from beef ribs or whatever. And I still say that I think that is dependent on the individual dog. For a dog like Lucky, I mean, the beef ribs, he's on my arm, so I can't totally show you, but they were like, I mean, they were like, you know, 12 inches, right? For him, that's enormous. He's not going to crack his teeth on that, right? He could barely get his mouth around it. But what he was able to do was I could with this one feed him a single one where I was always monitoring it and I was holding it and he was just pulling meat off it. He wasn't actually eating the bone. And he loved that. That was a great intro. I had tried giving him like chicken feet and he was like, no way. Not a chance. He just totally avoided that. Now they're one of his favorite things because he got used to it. But something that I found helpful was feeding him in different places. I found a place where he felt comfortable eating it. He loves to eat them outside. He really loves to eat them outside. Or I joke with Stacey all the time. I now have what I refer to, if you've ever watched that show Dexter, I have these old white sheets and it's honestly a murder mat. It looks like a murder scene. And I do this because he will drag the bone to the carpets, which I definitely do not appreciate. So I cover like this huge area with
With
the
his
murder
murder
mat,
bag.
with his murder mat. And we're good to go. And I found that when I put that down, that's sort of an invitation for him. He knows what's coming and he gets excited for that and he'll eat it on the murder mat. So maybe it's something like that that works. Or because it also allows him to kind of move around it. He likes to do that with the bone and pull it around and stuff. And so allowing
Because
that.
it's such high value, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's like such an incredible thing, and they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. I want to move it. I want to dance with it.
yeah,
We just want to be with it, like because they know how. It's almost like instinctive that they know that this is a really good thing. So
100%.
yeah,
100%. I also found, and we do talk about temperature, especially when we're talking about energetics, that we want to try to avoid frozen and really cold foods. But that being said, and I think that's like a general thing. That being said, I found a really great introduction for Lucky was to feed him frozen chicken feet or frozen wings, especially when he was younger. He really liked that texture. And it's also a great idea if you've got like a teething puppy
even properly.
that can be really soothing. So it might be just that they need it frozen or a little bit frozen in order to get interested in it. So you can try these different things to see.
And and I think from that perspective that the cold food thing that we talk about in the fact that it's hitting the system cold, but you've got to think by the time they've worked it, even if they've been given it frozen, by the time they've worked it and they've chewed it, it's going to be up to it's the temperature. It's going to have defrosted somewhat. It's going to be closer to body temperature, so it's not such a concern as having kind of an 80-10-10 straight out the fridge or straight out the
Right.
freezer. So that the fact that they've moved it around their mouth and they've chewed will have created some of that warmth and taken that chill off. So from that
Right.
aspect, yeah,
Yeah.
it's not so such a thing to be so concerned about if they do prefer it like that. As like you said, it can be a brilliant introduction because it doesn't go wobbly. It's like it's solid. There's no moving parts to it just yet. But then they discover there's moving parts and they're like, wow, this is amazing. And then next time you can give it to them that way. So yeah, it can be really a good way to make an easy
Introduce it.
introduction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also they might do better with you holding it at first and kind of getting them to chew on it. Once they learn to chew on it, then you release it to them and they can do what they want with it. The other thing that I found really helpful for, again, this might be a little bit more of a small dog thing, but feeding the whole carcass. So when I'm talking about carcass, what I like to do, and this is also my interest in sort of sustainability and the way that I eat with Lucky, like, when I'm thinking about what I'm feeding him, because I do DIY, I look at, oh, I'm going to get a chicken for me, cut off the meat for me, and then I feed him the frame, like what's left over, the kind of like chest area, whatever. And there's lots of good stuff on there still. There's loads of meat for him to still pull off. And actually feeding him that, this is something that Tom Lonsdale talks about. It's bigger than his head, and he has to work at it to get that, right? And so that for him was a great once I started feeding him carcass, he really got into it because he's working at the meat first before he's getting to the bone. He's like, oh, this is kind of exciting. And then he's learning to crunch the bone. And now it's one of his favorite things is working on a carcass. So that might be something too that you could do is you cut, and again, this is raw, so don't cook a whole chicken and then give the dog
Oh, no,
the
no.
do not do that. I'm saying you cut the meat off first that you're going to cook for yourself, and then you give them the raw carcass.
Yeah, because Ted has like quail body, like quail carcass bodies. I mean, again, they don't last very long with him, but they're fab, and you can get hold of, particularly in the UK, you can get hold of things like that, and literally like duck frames that I and pheasant frames and partridge frames, and I cut those up into kind of Ted size portions, and again, he'll just go to town on them. I should film him by when we get home from a walk, because that's when he has his raw meaty bone, is when we get home from a walk. And so that I use his raw meaty bone as part of his daily allowance for DIY. And he, as soon as we get in the door, he's kind of like by the side, because he knows where they're kept. He's like, because usually I've taken it out the fridge before I go on the walk so that it's at room temperature, because he's better with that. Although he would really take it, however, but because it's been so cold here, I have been a little bit more aware, and because he's been struggling a little bit with digestion, I wanted to make sure it's going in warm. But he just sits there, he's just like, I'm ready and I'm waiting. He pounces, runs off. He now has a murder mat, thanks to Alexia's genius idea, runs off and just inhales it. I mean, but that's the problem I have with him, is because he literally just sends them to the back and crunches them. He doesn't do enough chewing, which is why I have to get creative with the other bits. So I have to think about his 8 to 10 ratio, plus how am I going to get him to brush his teeth?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also I think it's worth saying here too, we do want to get our dogs used to having their mouths handled, like you'd said, and having their teeth brushed. But I did that with Lucky, and he still hates it. He absolutely hates it. So getting a toothbrush into his mouth is just impossible. So talking about getting creative, I agree. It's like I feel like I try anything and everything, and I'm not 100% successful. I just want to put that out there. Like I still have these issues, but I can share the things that are working and not working. And I think his dental health is significantly better when I focus on raw meaty bones. And I've said in previous episodes that I do gently cook Lucky's food, but I leave out the bone portion and I feed that as raw meaty bones so that he's getting the best of both worlds. And he doesn't have stinky breath unless he's had like sardines or something like that. Or if I've not given him, I can tell the difference if I've not given him a raw meaty bone for a couple of days, or like while we've been sort of in, traveling in various places and whatever, and I might not have had access to raw meaty bones, but I put bone meal in for his calcium. Definitely a difference. Like his breath does start to stink as a result of doing that. So
And speaking of sardines, omega-3 is a brilliant anti-inflammatory for monitoring the whole system, and that knock-on effect. We're using them for multi-purpose. It's a multi-purpose tool, really, isn't it? An omega-3, it goes in and does many jobs.
It
So
does.
yeah,
It
definitely,
does.
yeah, the
Well,
fishies. But
that's
even
perfect.
fish heads,
Yeah.
fish heads are great for a chew, because again, they're not. Again, this is size, but I mean, even for a little dog, salmon head for Lucky,
Yeah.
lovely, proper
Exactly.
little.
Exactly. And so, yeah, going with what your dog likes, there's all kinds of different options for that. But I think that's probably a good time as well, since you brought up omega-3s. Like, what are some other foods that we can be feeding? So we're talking about, again, dental health in relation to the whole body health, overall health. But there are some foods that kind of tie the two together that are specifically designed to support the teeth and dental health, but they also are great for the rest of the body. What would you sort of recommend?
Well, fresh food, obviously, no kibble. Fresh food. I was just looking through your list, because you'd put together a really cool list. But are we on energetics now, do you think, or we kind of crossed the boundary? This is always when it gets tricky with this F.E.T.C.H acronym, because when does one move into the next bit?
Right. Okay. Well, so we'll merge, and what you're referring to is and I found this when I was looking for support for Lucky's kidneys as well. When you're looking from a TCM perspective, so it's slightly less about energetics of like warm, cool, dry, damp, that kind of thing, but more from a TCM lens if we're going to be looking at fresh food. When you're looking at the body systems as they're broken down in TCM, they govern different parts of the body. So we're talking about the water system being governed by the kidneys. But then there are all other things that are tied to that. And bones and teeth, being extension of bones, are governed by the water and kidney system. So what that means is that when we are feeding foods that are supportive of the kidneys, it is by proxy supportive of the teeth, which I think is just amazing. And especially since we know that there's a link between dental health and kidney health. So if you've
Yeah,
got a
it's like
dog
they
with
already knew it.
exactly. I mean, TC, the more I dive into TCM, the more I'm just
Yeah,
like, oh my God, it's so amazing. But this, so I will kind of say this too. If you have a dog with kidney disease, or heart disease, you absolutely need to be looking at dental health. That needs to be a priority because they impact one another.
yeah.
But if we're looking at fresh foods that support the kidneys, thinking about like feeds like, so kidney, supporting kidney, dark foods, dark leafy greens, blueberries, foods that are at the start of life. And what I mean by that is like seeds, eggs, black sesame seeds in particular are really great for the kidneys and great for teeth. Parsley is a herb that's really great for the kidneys, also really great for teeth. Eggs, did I say eggs?
No, but that's the start of life one, isn't it? So
As the
it's the
start of life
beginning.
one.
Yeah.
Yep. And small fish, so sprats, sardines, anchovies, that kind of a thing are really good
Yeah.
for both.
And I think you've got cranberries on there as well, which is obviously a really good one for kind of urinary health all over, isn't it? Just because they're just packed full of goodies. So
Hmm.
yeah, I think anything like that.
Yep. Other kind of herby sort of things that you can add in are like dill, fennel. Those
Oh,
are
I
really great for the teeth. You don't like fennel? Oh, I love
don't know.
fennel.
Oh no, I
Oh, I
don't
love
like it.
it.
No,
Well,
you can have it.
I'll have it. It's really good for teeth. Things like green tea, the flavanols in green tea
Yeah.
are really good for the teeth as well. Wild strawberries. So if your dog during the strawberry season ever goes and munches on some of those berries, those are really good for the teeth. Bee propolis, which
Mm,
is, if I'm remembering this right, it's actually sap that's gathered from like
yes.
pine trees
Yeah.
and that the bees use to kind of rebuild the hive. That is really good for teeth. It's got antibacterial properties.
The trees always know.
They always know. They always know. Exactly. And something, so we mentioned dark things like dark leafy greens, shiitake mushrooms are really good. And Rita Hogan does a shiitake mushroom tincture that's designed for dental health that you can put on.
And a lot of people are starting to use them in broth and stuff as well, aren't they? To add in
Mhm.
the egg. Because and it's really interesting because I had a conversation with a colleague the other day, and we were talking about mushrooms, and she's gone down a mushroom rabbit hole about how about the extent that they need to be cooked to be able to actually, for us and the dogs to be able to break them down, to be able to access all the goodies in them, and that we really need to be thinking about the length of time that, and obviously raw isn't going to work, and
Mhm.
like raw mushrooms won't work, but how long
Cook
they
them.
need to be cooked to actually like release the goodies that are in there, and for the because they're so well protected, how long. And I was like, oh, that's another rabbit hole for me to go in. I mean, I love mushrooms, don't get, and I use shiitake a lot because they are, and there's a lot of science to back that up now. There's a lot of research papers into shiitake. So I love them for that purpose. But it was just another, like, yeah, that's so, and I was thinking, yeah, brilliant to put in bone broth because, of course, you're
Yeah.
going to be leaving it to simmer for a while, aren't you? So
Yeah.
actually, that's a great way of breaking that down and leaving, and then just leave them in the broth, can't you?
Yep.
Just to add into. So that's Ted's next round. I will
There
be
you
adding
go.
shiitake in. So see, I'm constantly learning. This is the whole thing. It's never, you read one thing, but then you kind of take it to the next level because I get curious.
Exactly. So how long did you find was a good time to actually cook them?
Well, she was she didn't give me a time, but I think it's a good couple of hours because it's about breaking everything down to release the beta glucans and some of those other, yeah,
Right.
it is beta, yeah, it is some
Yep.
of those, yeah, I get
Yep.
confused.
Yeah, yeah.
Um Release all of those and actually break them down so that we can use them and that they can use them
Mm.
because they're a fungus and they're so well protected. It's just fascinating. It was from the book by the mushroom medicinal mushroom vet dude. I can't remember his name. I'll have to find it and put it. Well, we can put it in the link. But
Yeah.
his book apparently is mind blowing. So of course that's a new one for my list.
There you go. I love it. I love it. But also you can use powdered.
Yes.
mushrooms, and you can add
Yeah.
that to the food, and that's also really good. Because again, most of these foods that we're mentioning, they are designed to help reduce the biofilm, as well as they're supporting the
Yeah.
kidneys and the teeth. Garlic is another one. Now, I want to say garlic gets a bad rap. We've kind of talked about this before. Small amounts of garlic for most dogs. You don't want to give it to puppies, lactating dogs, and some breeds like the Japanese breeds like Shibas and Akitas kind of avoid it because they don't process it as well. The problem with garlic is that it interferes with red blood cell production. So for those breeds are kind of predisposed to that. But small amounts of garlic, really, really good because it's naturally antimicrobial. So it helps with gingivitis, it helps to keep the biofilm down, as well as it's just really, really good for the microbiome generally and the oral microbiome. I am trapped again.
Oh no, Lucky,
There we
what
go.
have you done? And
Little
and
herb.
I was just looking on the list as well. Bone broth, it's another one just because from anti-inflammatory point of view and how well it supports the gut microbiome, so it's having a knock-on effect. And it's got calcium, magnesium. It's got because it's got
Everything.
what's in bones. You're creating the stuff to support the jaw. Because again,
Yep.
if we're talking back to kind of how well cemented in the teeth are, which is what can change as dogs get older, when they get loose and a little bit fragile. And of course, if they get loose, you've got the opportunity for the bacteria, the bad bacteria, to get in and
Right.
create that inflammation. So if we're creating strong bones and strong joints and all of those things, that's
Yep.
why bone broth can be so beautiful.
And along
It's
those, oh,
yeah.
totally. And it's just such a superfood. But along those lines of you mentioning about the calcium as well, foods like raw goat milk kefir are really good for that because not only do they have calcium, but they also have the probiotics. And I listened to a chat that Julianne Lee did with her team from Adored Beasts, and they were talking specifically about dental health and homeopathic approaches to dental
Mm.
health as well. And it's called, I think it's Calc Fluor is a homeopathic remedy that helps to rebuild the calcium as well. If you have any kind of questions, we are not homeopaths. If you have any kind of questions for homeopathic remedies, I definitely recommend looking at the Adored Beast site. Their blogs, so helpful, so helpful. So that's a route to go if you're interested in those kinds of
And Julie
approaches.
doesn't Julie does a monthly live as well, doesn't she, where she covers various topics and questions that people have put in. And yeah, there's some absolute nuggets of information in there. So yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah. But there are certain, so we just want to point it out that there are homeopathic remedies that you can add to help support dental health overall. And if you want to rebuild the teeth, that kind of a thing. But some other things that I'm looking at as we're kind of getting into the targeted approach now. Most people, I think, listening to this will have heard of products like Plaque Off or even Canadent using seaweeds as a targeted approach to helping with dental health because they do help to reduce the biofilm. But there are a couple of cautions with this. So there's more evidence. I think Connor Brady posted this past week, didn't he, about
Yeah, with some research out from Jean Dodds, wasn't it, about the hypo? Which one was it?
hypo,
Hypo or hypo? Hypo. I
hypo.
always get confused. Hypothyroid. I can't even say
Thyroid
it. Hypothyroidism. That's the one.
Hypothyroidism. Yeah. So Jean Dodds being an expert in the canine thyroid and the being concerns about offering too much iodine to these dogs. So for a normal healthy dog, this isn't an issue, but seaweed is very high in iodine and is why like when we're creating recipes suggest adding kelp in as a source of iodine, but you only need a super small amount. But if a dog is struggling with hypothyroidism, you don't want to add too much iodine. So if your dog has that condition and you're using something like Canadent, which or Plaque Off, which are seaweed based, basically like food toppers that are designed to help create the or to break the biofilm down. If your dog has hypothyroidism, it may be worth not using them and using something else as a targeted approach for your dental health. Or possibly, and this is where it would be we're talking to your vet or to your nutritionist, you could actually use, if you're doing a DIY diet, you could use those products as your iodine source. So you
And
have,
I use a teeth product for Ted as my iodine source. That's how I've done it because I've just switched to a new product which seems to be working. And it is one of Connor's the because Canadent was, I think, the original name, but now it's Pro-Thyroid or something. But again, I think he's just said he's going to re-look at all of that and
Yeah.
potentially change the wording on that new tin. But it's a lovely product because it's got charcoal. Oh, what else is in there? There's charcoal, there's the seaweed, there's a couple of others from an anti-inflammatory kind of detox perspective. This, and it's quite dark, so on the plate I have to mix it with a bit of broth, and it looks almost black. But because Ted's half Labrador, well, he's not, but he's got a Labrador trapped in there. He will eat anything, so I'm really lucky. But it is quite a dark product. So again, and some dogs I've found, because if I'm suggesting kelp as a supplement for the iodine, some dogs get quite funny about the smell of it. So sometimes it might not actually be suitable. I mean, there's loads of other lovely trace elements in there as well, but it's predominantly used as an iodine source. But some dogs get it. It can be quite a distinctive smell. So some dogs get a little bit funny, but sometimes mixing it with a bit of broth to take the edge off and kind of mixing it into the meat or whatever you're serving can just kind of alleviate that little bit. If your dog is going, no, I'm not having my dinner with that on, thank you, Ruth.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. So you just get creative with it. But these are things that you can mix into the food. And again, they just break down the biofilm. That's what they're designed to do. Probiotics is another thing that gets brought up as a support for dental health. Do you want to talk about your experience with that as well?
Well, yeah, I mean, the lovely Joe from Ingenious Probiotics, if you haven't checked out their range, they are fantastic. I think you can get them in the US through the Dr. Judy site, and they're for sale in the UK and South Africa and a few other. I think Joe's on a mission to kind of get his products into the world, and they are incredible. But as I've said earlier, that Ted's struggled with the build up. Predominantly, it's just the two canines. And I started using the Ingenious Probiotics spray on his teeth, and I was spraying daily. And I noticed one evening after about 2 months of solidly remembering to do it. Like I'd used it before, but it was like, oh, did I put it on today? Oh, I'll do it tomorrow. And it got a little bit like that. But when I actually found a routine, that one evening I just saw a bit had chipped off, like of the build up, and then I got my finger out, and the rest just literally flew off. And then I did it to the other side, and the same thing happened. And all of a sudden, we had these beautiful pearly white teeth. And he had got a little bit of gingivitis. He was a little bit sore just above that. And it all just settled down. And I was like, oh my goodness. But we have got a little bit of build up again. It's nowhere near as bad. And I'm on it daily. So now he has a spray of his teeth before we go out for a walk. So it's teeth spray harness. So that in my head, I've created a routine. And for him, he's not that fussed about having it like he's lipped and sprayed, but there's a positive association that we're leaving the house, we're going on a walk. So I'm going to do this thing to you, but there's a good reason, and we're going out the door. So I was trying to create it into our routine so that I doubled it up with something that he was going to enjoy as well. So any things like that you can do, just if they're a little bit unsure, because it's a squirt, it's a sound. Some of them I think you've tried it with Lucky, haven't you? And he's not so.
He doesn't like the smell of it either, and he won't let me spray it. But it does say on the bottle as well that you can put it on like gauze or something and then wipe it onto the dog's teeth and gums. He doesn't like having gauze put in his mouth, so I end up just putting it on my finger, and I have to have a treat in one hand, and I bribe him that if he lets me put on his teeth, then he gets the treat. So you just have to get creative and work with your own dog. I have noticed a bit of a difference. I still have the issue with him, but part of it is me not being necessarily as consistent with it as I need to be. But I think it's also that's just his problem area, and it would be much worse if I weren't doing what I'm doing. Yeah. But the other thing with probiotics is you will see a benefit too if you're just adding probiotics to your dog's food, right? If you're incorporating probiotics, because again, you're building the microbiome. But I know that some people, and I think Julianne Lee talks about this too, with Adored Beasts probiotics, that you can mix them into something like, because they're a powder, you can mix them into something like MCT oil or coconut oil. Coconut oil can be kind of divisive. Some people feel like it's really bad for dogs, others not so bad. So whatever works for you, but you can actually mix it in to create like a paste. And then you can either brush the dog's teeth with that if they'll let you do it with either a brush or a gauze, or you can just put it on their teeth. And it's the same idea that it's meant to disrupt the biofilm so that the plaque doesn't gather and create tartar.
Yeah, and you can even use things because I make Ted a toothpaste, which is essentially what you're doing by mixing that. I haven't ever added probiotics though, but that's my next
Ah,
one.
there you go.
See, always learning. But I've added peppermint oil to it as well before. Just one because the peppermint's really great because it's anti-inflammatory. It helps with the smell and all of those other things. So there are some essential oils, and I think if there's an article with Dogs Naturally that maybe we could put in the link or share somewhere that
Hmm.
because there was about 4 different types of toothpaste that you could make, and I was like, oh, I need to try all of those because they look great. Because
Yeah.
again, you know what's in them, you've got control. So if you know that one of the because one of them had turmeric in it, and I was like, that's great for some dogs, but it's not going to work for Ted, so I won't use that one. But there was some other ones. There was a bone broth toothpaste. I was like, now that's a clever idea. So
Yeah.
there's some very handy little ones in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. And again, it is just finding what works with your with your
Yeah.
dog, what they'll tolerate,
Yeah.
all of that kind of stuff. Also, I know that Rita Hogan has various remedies for dental health. I mentioned she's got the shiitake mushroom tincture, but I think she has some different like herbal things with like calendula or and burdock. So looking at her book might be an option for you, as well as check
Not
out
long
her.
now.
I know it's coming out soon.
Very
Um,
soon.
but also her blogs and stuff like that. And I think as well, like we've talked about this before with the herbal side of things. I've Rita's actually mentioned this in her interviews on the podcast. Aligning the herbs that she's recommending with your dog's energetics. So if you're looking at something for a particular thing, there will be different herbs that are supportive of warm dogs and cool dogs. And so you just find something that works for your dog, like to Stacy's point of avoiding turmeric for Ted because he tends to be a hot dog, but there will be an alternative. So, and I think Rita's got all of that outlined in her book, so that would be a really good
And I
resource.
think she's even got a short dental course on her
I think she does.
platform as well. I think she's got a dental health one as well.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well, we're
she's
checking
just
out.
amazing. But
She is
yeah.
amazing. What do you think of water additives? I know a lot of people say that they've obviously, excuse me, seen, used, or been told about water additives. What's your thought?
I'm not a fan, just because you don't always know what's in there, and just because and the impact that it could have on other systems like the microbiome and other the gut microbiome. Because again, they're drinking it, and then we're thinking about kidneys and all those other things because we don't because some of the additives and some of the bit you might. I just feel like I'd rather use a bit of bone broth because I know what's
Yeah.
in there. And again, if you're fresh feeding, they won't drink as much. So are they going to be drinking enough to get the value of what the potential active ingredients are in there? I don't know. So I think for me, I would rather go in through a food or a supplement because then it's going direct in rather than something that they may or may not drink and you may or may not be 100% sure on what the ingredients are. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not a fan
Yeah.
personally.
No, I
Are you
agree
the
with
same
you.
or yeah?
Yeah, no, I'm the same. And I also think I I always, if I'm going to be adding anything to water, so for example, I might recommend, and I do this for Lucky too in the summer, especially when we were in Mexico and it was super, super hot. I would have two water bowls for him, one that was just plain filtered water, and then a second one that had a pinch of sea salt in it as an electrolyte, but I always make that separate from his normal water because I don't want to turn him off his water. I want him to be able to
Yeah.
self-select. So if you are going to add anything to water, I would just always recommend having a second bowl.
Yeah, and if they don't like it, there's a reason, and if they don't use it, they don't. So they're telling you it's not for them. But
Exactly.
maybe try a little bowl of bone broth next to the other water bowl and see whether that's, I've yet to see a dog put
100%.
down bone broth, but
100%. 100%. Exactly. Exactly. And then essential oils. So you mentioned that you use peppermint.
yeah.
There are different, are there any other essential oils that you've used?
No, I've only used peppermint. No, yeah, just peppermint I've
Yeah.
only used.
There
There
are
are
other
others.
there are
Yeah.
others. Yeah. I personally have not used them because Lucky's a little bit sensitive with that kind of stuff. going in the mouth. But
Yeah, because they can be quite. I mean, I think I put like one drop into the container that, and even I could smell it. So I'm like,
mhm,
if I can smell it, they're going to be able to smell it like, 100 times
yeah,
more. So it is. I think it is very dog dependent whether
yeah,
they're okay with strong smells
yeah,
or if they're of a more sensitive disposition and don't like wafty things. Then no, that it's probably not going to work for you or
exactly.
for your dog. So yeah, I think that would be a last resort for me, adding in an essential oil. I'd go with the probiotics and some of the other bits first versus an essential oil just because of the smell and that you
Hmm.
might put them off and you don't want to create more negative associations with things going in the mouth. That if we're trying to make it a positive experience, the last thing we want to do is then make it worse because we've put something really stinky in there that they don't like.
Exactly. Exactly. And I guess like my bit of guidance for essential oils is you always, whether you're using that for flea and tick prevention or you're using it for toothpaste or even using it within the context of zoo pharmacognosy where you're just having them smell, you always want to focus on quality. So you want a really good brand.
Yeah,
There are so many different brands out there and not a lot of them are really great quality. So I always recommend like look for a good brand if you're going to use them. And
yeah,
we mentioned homeopathy.
yeah,
Um, Adored Beast would be my kind of go-to for any kind
yeah,
of questions about that. And then we were starting to talk about like some of the concerns around looking at dental health. And so like with seniors, we see this a lot where I'll have listeners ask me like, what do you think about dentals for seniors? Because there's that concern with the anesthesia. I always think that it's really a conversation to have with your vet or your veterinary surgeon about that because you want to make sure that the dog is in a physical shape to be able to handle it. So that's where they would run blood work. You always want blood work run to see how they can handle the anesthesia. But I don't necessarily say a blanket no to seniors because living in pain, constant pain, and the risk of infection or anything else that can come from dental disease can actually cut their lives shorter. So it's one of those things you got to kind of weigh the risks.
yeah.
But I would have a proper conversation with a vet or a veterinary surgeon about that. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting you say that because I've had this conversation with my holistic vet about Ted back in just in December because I'd said to her again, we've got a bit of the build up and said the things that I'm doing, and she recommended against me doing like a full scale and polish with the vet because she said because he's had some seizures last year that that's where my risk and benefit part of the conversation came in because would I potentially be putting him at higher risk because we've had seizures and the last one was only in October, so or do I, if I get to kind of 6 months, a year clear of seizures, would then it potentially, so it's something that has been discussed. And at the moment, the risk for me is too high to potentially put him through that. So I'm looking at like, there's a Pet brush that you can get that's like a sonic
Hmm.
pulse one that's really really good that I've seen some incredible results with. So and there's some vet nurses that actually come to your house and do stuff like that. So that's one of my next things to do for this year, next month or so, is to look at getting someone to come in and do it because I did once take him to a groomer's that did it and he was having none of it. He was like,
Right,
no, this isn't for
right,
me. But at home, like where he has his osteopath appointments when she comes to the house, he's so much more relaxed. So again, it's trying to find the solution for your dog.
right.
So if she comes to the house and he can sit on my lap and cuddle me while she just, gives his teeth a whiz over, then I think we might be onto something. So it's trying to find what works for him. But the anesthesia thing for me at the moment is a no. And that's after that conversation with his holistic vet because she just said, no, it's not the right thing for him. So
Yeah,
if you have got a dog that has a history of epilepsy or kind of idiopathic seizures where there's no known cause or anything, then it is something to consider if you're considering having a dental, that there
yeah,
is a potential that you're adding another layer of potential risk in the
yeah,
fact that it may be detrimental to them. So it's just
right.
worth, like you say, have that conversation with your vet.
Yeah.
because they can help you make that decision.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. And there is no one right or wrong way. It really is looking at like what's right for your particular dog and then having them help you to weigh the risks. What's going to be worse for your dog.
Yeah,
Um,
because you've put I have because we were talking about the kind of detox process that you could potentially do, couldn't you, instead? So if I could get Ted to a point where we haven't had seizures for a year, then maybe I would consider it, because then I would run a detox protocol after he's had the anesthesia
mhm.
so that I can support his system. So there are ways of kind of navigating that territory of, if we're going to go through it, well, actually, what can we do before it to support the liver before
Yeah.
we go in, and then what can we do to support the liver when we come through the other side of it, so that we can help the body get rid of all those toxins and all of that stuff out of the body as quickly as possible, and we haven't got anything kind of festering too long in the
Yeah.
body.
I know
Mm.
that, again, going back to Julianne Lee and Adored Beast, that they do talk about homeopathic things that you can use before and after to support anesthesia. But what are some other things that you would recommend for detox, sort of generally, if you're not necessarily going down the homeopathic route, but other forms of detox you can add in?
The anything like the humic and the fulvic acid, they're brilliant. In the UK, we've actually got a more mud product it is mud, but
Hmm.
it's from like it comes from Germany, but it's black mud, but it's just packed full of humic and fulvic acid, so it just helps. Ted loves it. It's weird, but I mean, if your dog eats mud, let them, go for it. But that's a brilliant product. Chlorella's really great as well for kind of bentonite clay, any of those ones that help draw those toxins and kind of bind them to get rid of them. They're the ones that we want to kind of be considering, because they're the ones that will support getting the bad stuff out
Yeah.
and letting the body process stuff as quickly as possible. So yeah, anything like that, I think, really, yeah.
And also, when you combine chlorella with what we would call in the US cilantro or coriander, when you combine them
Oh
together,
yes.
they're an excellent kind of detox protocol as well. So that's something you can
Oh,
add into the food.
and milk thistle, we miss milk thistle as well.
Yeah,
That can be another lovely one. But
yeah,
again, I think the thing with detox, I think that's important to mention, is that a lot of people kind of think, oh, this is kind of a constant thing. They just need it, and we only want it for a certain amount of period of time. We don't want to just keep them on that,
hmm,
because then it can have a negative effect. It can go too far the other way. So we just want to support them for a period of time after they've had this procedure.
hmm.
It's not a long term, oh, we've got to keep our dog in detox. It's not,
Right,
no, because otherwise we could go the other way and cause issues. So
exactly,
let's do that. Yeah.
exactly. And
Yeah.
also things that you can generally add in or be cognizant that you're including regularly to support your dog's immune system generally. So things like antioxidants. CoQ10 is another antioxidant. I don't remember if we mentioned that before, but that was something that I was using quite regularly to help support Lucky's kidney health. And again, that supports teeth health, but that's a powerful antioxidant. So if you're looking at pre and post anesthesia, that can be super helpful as well.
Yeah. And your vitamin E's and anything like that that act as your antioxidants to help just break everything down and get it out. So yeah, all those goodies. Lovely.
So good.
Yes,
A-
please.
And I think too, I wanted to come back to something you had mentioned before, where we're kind of going into the holistic health portion of Fetch now, of how we start to kind of put all these pieces together. You had talked about getting your dog used to having their mouth handled. Did you find anything in particular was really helpful for that when you were doing it with Ted? Because you also got him, he wasn't a puppy, so that's why I wanted to raise it too. That
Yeah,
yeah,
I
you want
mean,
to start with your puppy, but as an adult, you can start it too.
yeah, because he was just shy of 2 when we got him. He's always been pretty amenable in terms of anything being done. He's just kind of, oh, whatever. But he doesn't like his ears being brushed, though. He's not a big fan of that. But he's generally pretty good. So I think it's just because I've tried to pair it with something good, a bit like with the spray and the harness. So it's just creating those little moments where you can do, and it's not if you pick up the toothbrush or the gauze or whatever and they go running, you know that that's an issue. So even if it takes breaking it down into really tiny steps, like literally just sitting with them with the gauze next to you, and then just gradually day by day increasing, even let them just smell the gauze, and then the next step you put a little bit of the toothpaste on. You don't actually do it until you get their trust to be able to put that in their mouth. And or like you do with Lucky, just putting your finger in, even that can be too much for some dogs. But again, by building the trust and that you're not going to hurt them, and it's a good thing because there's a treat at the other end of it potentially. It's how you work with your dog to do that and build that relationship so that it doesn't become an issue. But when you get them when they're older, it can be trickier than when they're puppies, because obviously when they're puppies, they're just sponges, and you can kind of, that whole husbandry thing and is part of what you do with them. But if you get them when they're older, it might be a little bit tricky, particularly if they're a rescue or if they've even got dental health issues. When they come to you, they're not going to want their mouth. And that's when you would have to choose anaesthetic and go down that route to make sure that you're getting them cleaned, so that then you can kind of start from scratch. You're starting from a level playing field, you've done the work, and then you can build on the trust and all the other things, because you might not have time to do that if there is an issue. You need to act faster. So, and some of the kind of the training takes time. It's not going to be an overnight thing.
No, I feel like I'm still working with it, but there are some really good resources for consent training. I know, like, we've both used Chirag Patel's
It's
like
fab.
bucket
Brilliant.
work, for example. I mean, there's a lot of different resources around that, and I definitely think it's worth pursuing that and adding that, like you can do it for nails, you can do it for any kind of husbandry stuff, getting dogs used to having things like syringes around them or bottles for like eye drops or ears or any of that kind of stuff. But working it into your relationship with your dog, like how you're engaging with them and making it into games so that they get used to these kinds of things. And like I said, I still struggle with Lucky with it, but he's definitely, I mean, there was a point he wouldn't let me at all put my finger in his mouth doing this. So I feel like we're making like small little steps, but it takes time. It takes
Yeah.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. And yeah, I mean, like I said, with Ted, it's before walkies, but I want to be able to get a little bit more toothpaste in there, but that's probably the bit he's not. I mean, he kind of just goes, oh, really? But I know he's not enjoying it that much. So there's probably a little bit more that I can do. Not that I think he's ever really going to enjoy it, but just be a little bit more comfortable with it, in the
Yeah.
fact that, oh, here she comes with that again. It really. So that's why I'm trying to mix up his bones to try and get him to do it, because he won't use those front ones.
Right. I know. And that's again where I like carcass for Lucky, for a small dog to do that kind of thing. You just have to get creative. You really do. But there are a couple of things I did want to bring up as well, as we're talking about things like toothpaste and all that kind of stuff. I did have somebody ask, which is why I wanted to make sure to mention it. Can you use human toothpaste or mouthwash? And the answer is absolutely no. No, no, no. Human toothpaste and mouthwash contain xylitol, which is a sweetener that is toxic to dogs. So if you are going to be using toothpaste, only use something that is specifically for dogs. And I definitely would recommend, versus a lot of the kind of chemically stuff that you can get out there commercially, make your own with some of the things that we've suggested. And like we said, we'll include the Dogs Naturally link as well, so you can see some different recipes. That way you know exactly what's going in it and there's no chemical garbage kind of thing.
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, no human toothpaste. No, 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 no.
No. And another thing too is that when you start to see pain or behavior changes, like your dog might be a little bit more aggressive or lethargic, or they start refusing food, that kind of a thing, from a holistic health perspective with Fetch, those could be, and also curiosity, those could be indicators that there are problems with the teeth or somewhere in the mouth. So that might be a little kind of clue to start looking at that and talk to your vet about whether or not there's an issue.
Even the other end, that maybe
Mm-hmm.
urinating more, and like, is that a kidney
Mm-hmm.
trigger? Is that linked somewhere else? So it's again getting to know your dog's normal, and that goes back to the curiosity part, as well as I think that crosses both, doesn't it? That kind of getting to know your dog's normal, and even if you need to take photos of their teeth over the course of like 6 months just to track train changes, so that if you do need to go to a vet, you can go, well, this is where we were in February and this is where we are like 6 months later. I think it's time that we need to do something, or what should I do? And so there's other ways of kind of monitoring those things. It's just kind of being open to thinking about things from, other perspectives, isn't it? And
Hmm.
that you all those some people go, but that isn't that like overkill? And I'm like, well, no, because then you've got evidence. You
Right.
you you get to know your dog.
Right.
You can see what's going on. It's not, I don't think that is overkill. I don't think it's any different from kind of, you might be monitoring a mole, for example, or, so,
Right.
it's that type of thing. It's just being generally aware of what's going on in your body, what's going on in their body. And particularly as they get older, those things can change quite rapidly, and they
Right.
can happen within a couple of weeks sometimes, maybe. So the more information we have, and information is power, the more we've got, you're onto a winner, aren't you, really?
Exactly. Exactly. No, I 100% agree. And again, our whole point with Fetch is about you becoming an advocate for your dog's health. And this is part of how you do this. And the more that you do this kind of tracking and stuff, the more it becomes second nature. So at first it might feel like, oh, something I have to remember to do, but in reality, it just becomes second nature. And that information is really powerful. I agree.
Yeah. I just use notes on my phone. That's it. If I
Yeah.
need to kind of track something, I've got like a little TED note and I just add it in. So when I went to his holistic vet and I spoke to her about his seizures, I could give her the times, the dates, the length, everything. It was just in one place because I knew that that was part of the puzzle that she needed to kind of to know which herbs and which supplements she was going to give him. So I had it already, and it took 2 minutes, not even that, on the day, but
Hmm.
it gave so much information to the vet to be able to make decisions about how she was going to support him. So it to me it's a no-brainer. But
Yeah. Also, I love that when you did that, you also included the moon cycles, which is another thing that we'll talk about within Fetch too. But
well,
yeah, she asked you about that.
she asked me, she said, and the two of them were on the same moon cycle, so that was interesting. But yeah, she just said, "Oh, I wonder what the moon," and I went, "I can tell you that because I'd already tracked it." She was like, "Oh, you are good."
But those are all things that are really helpful for us putting the puzzle pieces together to see where there might be patterns. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
The last thing that I personally, and I'll open it to you, Stace, for anything you want to add to this, but this kind of it's related to dental health, but it's also kind of something I'd like to add into the conversation generally as we're thinking about our dogs. And this is something around the sustainability issue of
Mm,
what we're using and how we're sourcing things. And I'm bringing this up here because we've mentioned a couple of products, like we've mentioned like Canadent, for example, which is Irish kelp. Um, Even some of the probiotics that are being shipped here, there, and everywhere. And I know like there's the New Zealand deer velvet product that Judy Morgan uses. And I'm not demonizing anything. I'm adding something into the conversation that is something that I've had to think about. I started to really become concerned about the sustainability factor of a lot of the products that we are using. In part, my background is in looking at sustainability, climate change. That was what my PhD research was on. And I was specifically in my own research looking at how we bring these questions down to the local and the individual level, and how do we make some of these decisions for ourselves. And I started to become really aware of it in regards to slippery elm, which
mm,
is now on the endangered list. And we recommend that, and we talk about it a lot with dogs. And we talk a lot about sourcing some of these products too from like New Zealand, or like I was just saying from Ireland, and we ship them all over the world. And I just think it's something that we should be aware of. Like, can we ask ourselves, is there a possibility of finding something more locally that would serve the same purpose? Or, you know, is there an alternative to some of this as we become aware, again, in this kind of holistic perspective of our place in the ecosystems? How do we better make some better, more sustainable decisions? So I just wanted to kind of put that out there. It doesn't mean don't use any of these products. I just think it's worth asking this question.
I think just having an awareness as well that there could be, if you're going to use one of those products, is there something that could be found more locally and supporting a UK business or a wherever you are business or industry, rather than shipping in. And I know that's not always possible, and I know it does become really, really hard. I really get that, but sometimes there are alternatives, but sometimes it just takes a little bit more time to kind of do that research. And I think that's probably something that we will be covering quite a bit in the membership, won't we, in terms of actually how to make those decisions and what to look for, and to find those, not necessarily replacements, but just alternatives and other that have similar qualities that could do the same thing, but just doesn't need to come so far. And whether it's even from an ethical perspective, like the deer velvet, or whether it is from an air mileage perspective and the shipping, there's so many parts to that need to be considered. And I think that it is. I mean, we've discussed this at length off camera anyway, haven't we? But even when it comes down to, how you're feeding and the organ meat that the butchers have and all of those things, how we can use those things. So, I think the sustainability part, particularly with supplements, is one that needs to be having a conversation around. And looking for other options.
Yeah. So I guess too, I'd like to kind of throw that out to you guys as the listeners as well. Is sustainability something that you think about in regards to some of this stuff? And also, what have you found locally that's really useful? That would be interesting to know.
That would be cool, wouldn't it? That would be great to build a resource of like really cool alternatives that people have found in various locations. That would be really cool. Like that.
Yeah. So let us know. You can either DM us either at Mystic Dog Mama or at Hozo Hounds, and let us know. It'd be interesting to know. Is there anything else you wanted to raise when we're thinking about Dental Health Awareness Month?
No, but I don't think so. It's just that it's not only February, it's every month. But it's just great that at least it gets some kind of spotlight into the importance of it, and that it is a real indicator of overall health. So it's just an important one to be monitoring. I think that's it, isn't it?
Absolutely. And if you are enjoying these conversations and you're enjoying this approach, the F.E.T.C.H approach to just life and health with your dog, we would love to see you in our membership. So come on over, get some more information. We have a wait list. We're opening everything up for our founding members. So if you're interested in getting on the wait list, so you get the announcement, send me a message either at Mystic Dog Mama on Instagram or on my website, mysticdogmama.com, and I will add you to the list and we'll get all that information sorted. But we're really keen to create a community where we're having these kinds of conversations, and we want to address things that are important to you, both within the membership and on this series on the podcast. So again, that being said, if there are any particular issues you'd like us to address, whether that's a health condition or that's a food or a vitamin or something you want to know more about when it comes to having a nourished life with your dogs, then reach out and we will be sure to do another episode on that. Anything else?
No, just give us more rabbit holes. We're happy.
Exactly. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next month for our next F.E.T.C.H First Friday.
In March. Scary.
In March.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. I hope you enjoyed our first F.E.T.C.H Friday on dental health. What have you found most helpful to keep your pup's teeth clean and healthy? We would love to know. DM me on Instagram at Mystic Dog Mama, or you can also reach out to Stacey at Hozo_Hounds. For next month's episode, we're going to tackle the often overwhelming and confusing world of flea, tick, and heartworm prevention. So if you have any questions on this, please DM me at Mystic Dog Mama or contact me at mysticdogmama.com, and we'll be sure to address your questions in the episode. And if you'd like more information on how to become a founding member of our F.E.T.C.H membership, where you'll get to learn in community how to support your dog's optimal health through evidence-based nutrition and spiritual wisdom, check out the link in the show notes to sign up for our newsletter, and you'll also get your free copy of our guide to decoding your dog's energetic paw print. Okay, until next time.